All right, so it's late November. It's a pretty nice day out, especially out here in town. It's a little more cloudy, but it's got above 50 degrees, so it's not too cold today. It's not windy, which is extremely rare for when it's this clear this time of year. But I just want to clarify a few things. Some people say winterize your motorcycle, do not start it all winter long, and that's good. You know, if you want, go ahead and winterize it. You know, put non-ethanol in your tank, fuel stabilizers, top all the fluids off, or you can do something like empty your tank entirely, which I wouldn't recommend. I would say keep it absolutely full, so that way there's no oxygen in the tank and it won't oxidize on the inside. I think it's better to just have non-ethanol filled all the way than draining your tank out. But the thing is this, is if it's winter, you know, if it's below freezing, if it's freezing, I would say don't start it. Keep it on the tender. Your bike, you know, starting it freezing, mechanical components don't really like that too much. So if you can, wait till it's a nice, warmer, you know, decent day where it's at least high 40s, you know, 50 degrees or so, so that way the start of the motor isn't below freezing. But what you want to do is this. You never just want to start your bike, let it run, and let it get warm to, like, you know, 160, 180. What you want to do is you want to let it run for a long time. This has been running about 20 minutes now. But the main part is that you want to make sure that the heat cycles are going to happen. Right now it's at 213. In a few more degrees, the fans are going to kick on. You want to make sure that the cooling cycles are going round. And I would say do that at least twice. At least twice. So you let it get all the way to the point where your bike is in neutral and the cooling cycles are happening at least twice. And the reason why we want that is because if you don't let the heat cycles happen, you're not going to get the maximum amount of coolant to run through your bike, which is another main fluid. And on top of that, if you just get your bike slightly warm, you want the top of the motor all the way down to the bottom of the motor to get hot. And I don't mean warm like 160, I mean hot, 200 degrees. Because what happens is, when the top of the motor is warm, and if you just get your bike warm and you've cut it, you know, you're like, oh, I warmed my bike up for winter, and then you cut it and the bottom of the motor is still not hot, not warm, but hot, you're leaving a little bit of moisture in there. You want to get the oil in the bottom of the motor hot enough to where all the leftover moistures or any kind of water that's happening in the motor is evaporating and cooking when you're starting it up throughout winter. So that's why I'll let my bike run for at least a half hour. At least. You know, make sure you start it on idle. I've seen the most ridiculous videos where people start their bike up and bam to red line. Do not do that. Motorcycle oil has an optimal temperature of 160 degrees, so that should be a baseline, especially when you're starting your bike from that cold. Let it idle. Let the idle drop, as your bike should naturally do that. It'll start kind of high and it'll slowly drop as the oil pumps are registering that there's oil in the top of the motor. It'll drop a little bit, and as it gets warmer, it'll slowly drop. My bike will start at 2,000 RPMs. It's probably about 1,100 right now. About 1,200 to 11, which means it's already ran through another heat cycle. Now, I would say this also, after your bike runs through a heat cycle, at least once, go ahead, give it some revs. Don't immediately wide open throttle, give it a burp, you know, let some of that oil fling everywhere. And then if you want, go ahead and give it some revs. Nothing's wrong with that, you know? It's nice and hot. The bottom of the motor is extremely hot. The top of the motor is super hot. Cooling systems are hot. It's ramping back up, and it's already been running for a while, so, you know, burp, burp. You want the oil to be everywhere in the motor. You want it to get nice and resaturated. So I have seen videos like where it says, you know, do not start your bike during winter. Now, I would say the caveat to that is if you don't start your bike at least a few times in the winter when you have a decently warm day, the chances of some kind of failure go up a little bit because these motors like to run. That's what they're meant for. So I would say at least start your bike a couple times, especially when you have a sudden nice day where it's 50 degrees outside and sunny. Take the time, make sure your oil's all topped off, you know, whatever it is you gotta do. Let it run, let the heat cycles run through. Your bike appreciates it. But when it's freezing outside, just keep it on the tender, you know? But that's the truth when it comes to starting your bike during the winter. If you want, you can just fully winterize it. Don't touch it all winter long. But I will say this, if you do not touch it all winter long, what you will have to do at the beginning of each season is you will 110% need to replace and flush all the fluids. Brake fluid, motor oil, coolant. And then you're gonna have to go a little bit further. If you're not starting the bike at all winter, you need to replace the spark plugs. You're gonna definitely want to clean the air box. I mean, you're gonna want to clean that anyways, but you know, if you're not letting it run all winter long, chances are you're gonna go to pop it over and one of your spark plugs might not work because they haven't been fired in a very long period of time. Sometimes 6, 7 months, you know. But don't be afraid to start your bike in the winter. Just make sure you're doing it correctly. Make sure you're letting the bottom of and that is the most important thing. Make sure the bottom of the motor is getting hot. And I don't mean warm, I mean hot as hell. You want to make sure the oil cooler's running oil through it. Your cooling system's running coolant through it. Your fans are kicking over. You know, run your high beams once in a while. All the fun stuff. All right.